Hello, my knowledge-thirsty beauties, and welcome to another episode of DP2daBrain. We have another feast for your frontal cortexes today. With me is Dr. Brian Bradshaw. Now, I can't give you his whole bio because it is so impressive and extensive that it will be the whole episode. So check down in the description for his full bio. But to hit the bullet points, BS in music, a doctorate in computer information and communications, forensics, security, and crypto certified, as well as certifications in CISCO, a master's in higher education administration, and a veteran, by the way, thank you for your service, a veteran in our U.S. Army, specifically in psychological warfare. Did I miss anything exciting?
No, that's quick sum up, I would say.
And also, you're very involved in the education side of things now. You you taught at a couple of universities, and you are now currently at Miami U of Ohio. Go Red Hawks.
That's where I'm currently at. I have another opportunity that I'll announce not too far off, but I can't currently go into it.
Sure. Nice.
And currently, I'm also helping American University in Baghdad develop their IS program in country. It's a university based on the American way of teaching, and it is actually located in Saddam Hussein's former palace.
Interesting. A little extra salt on the nuts, I guess, if that's an appropriate expression here. And one of your certifications which popped out at me that I would love to start with is your certification in cryptocurrency. Now, I mean, anyone who's been following the news lately has been seeing that word popping up a lot, be it, your memes with the Dogecoin, or, a lot of entertainers are starting to get into the NFT world. So, I mean, in your opinion, to sum it up, I guess, you've been tracking this a lot longer than the average person. Where do you see, do you see interest in crypto continuing to grow, or do you see it as more of a fad?
No, I see it continuing to grow. Imagine you can put your money in crypto and it is not based on any one particular country's economy, such as the dollar or the sterling or the euro or, the yen would be. It is a safe currency. If you have places like Argentina where your currency is devalued so much because what's going on in the country, you can have money in cryptocurrency and it's a safer environment for you to hold your money. And what has really even kept it from exploding even that much more is the United States government can't figure out how to get their hands wrapped around it in order to maintain it. And there's so many different cryptocurrencies that, for example, they are doing half decent with a couple of the larger cryptos. They're working out plans, but as you were saying, even Hollywood, there's one that just came out that's a tribute to Jay and Silent Bob.
Yeah.
Their currency.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think people don't necessarily take it seriously, and they think it. I hear it's. People think it's a digital 21st pump and dump scheme. Basically, is what they think it is, and they're just. I don't know, when they justify why Bitcoin holds no value, everything they say can also be attributed to the U.S. dollar. So, there's a funny little video of someone like in medieval times trying to buy something with gold, and like they're explaining it like Bitcoin, and the dude's like, well, can I eat it? Well, then what good is it to me? He's like, no, if you hold it and enough people, it's really quite clever. I'll have to send you the link sometime.
That sounds good.
But one of the most important things for me for crypto, kind of like you mentioned, is the decentralization aspect of it. Now, I am more about decentralizing from corporate interests than national interests. Personally, that's where I'm looking at things. I don't like banks and such. I think it's crazy that I have money in one bank account and I want to put it in another bank account, and my money disappears for 4 days into some magical void. When with crypto, click, done, just like that. And then I don't know, people just with the value spikes that you're seeing, which are based on a lot of different factors, because it's not as, every time we have a new wave of people jumping into crypto, you're going to see it spike. So the spike is driven by new interest, where at some point, you'll hit a point where you've hit maximum interest, if you will, and then you'll see them kind of stabilize out. Is that an accurate assessment?
That's accurate, but two, you also have to throw into that mix, for example, the largest coin exchange system going public. Well, that means now they have to answer to stock shareholders and stock members. They have to answer to Wall Street, which they didn't have to do before. So
You're referring to Coinbase, correct?
correct, correct. So it was actually a bad thing that they went public for Coinbase itself, because now you fall under all these regulation controls. You can even fall under wire transfer laws within the United States. RICA Act laws that was meant to use against the mafia within the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they created these series of RICO acts. One of them is wire fraud. Well, they can now step in. You paid somebody, you paid them too high for something for service, and say you were doing this, and it's wire fraud, and you can be charged under RICO laws.
I don't remember what I was just reading, something where they use they charge everyone with mail fraud as like an excuse to start the investigation.
Yeah, yeah.
It reminds me of what they got Al Capone on a parking ticket, I think.
And then they got them through back taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
And that's another thing, the United States can't figure out, and several other countries can't figure out how to tax it. And that was the reason cryptocurrency was really developed anyway. It was a forefront of, do you know much about Macau?
Not particularly, no.
Macau is right above Hong Kong, between Hong Kong and mainland China. It's another island country like Hong Kong is. It is the gambling mecca of the world. Take Vegas, take Monaco, take all the Indian reservations, take every single casino that you can think of in the United States and Canada, and it would only equal 1/8 of the amount of money that goes to Macau. So the cryptocurrency was helped to, part of the reason it was developed was so the big whales can take their winnings back to their own countries and hide it from taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And still have access to it. And then the black market got a hold of it and said, hey, this is a cool idea. We could use it for Silk Road. We could use it for other things to buy.
Yeah.
You name it. Anything from knockoff Nikes to a person.
Well, that's a lot of the whisperings I hear out of the intelligence sector about cryptocurrency is, to be honest, the kind of things I don't like to hear, and the same things they make about encryption, where anything that's hidden, well, why do you need to hide it? Why do you need encrypted messaging if you don't have anything to hide? I don't know. Where do you come down on the issue of encrypted messaging? Should citizens have a right to have encrypted messaging from their government?
Yes, it's the same thing. The same aspect is you write a letter. If you write a letter to someone and you seal it in that envelope, put a stamp on it, put it through the United States Post Office, there is a reasonable aspect in your mind that says no one else is going to read this letter. Yeah. But for some reason, we don't hold the whole electronic email system to the same accountability. In fact, we give people, providers, internet providers and others, open access that they can actually read those when you send it. Yeah. So that those privacy laws need to be applied more to messaging systems.
Well, I want to touch a little bit later on this, but I think we would both agree our legislation is far behind technology.
Oh, absolutely.
We're terrible at legislating technology because most of our leaders have been office since before I was born. But anyway, I want to wrap up on the crypto real quick before we move too far on to another subject. Something else that I also like to point out that I like even more than, you know, I've been told that you can buy stuff with Bitcoin and stuff like that, but that's not, they're more about holders of value. Like it's, I like to think of it as digital gold. People like to talk about the gold standard. I think Bitcoin and those kind of things operate on a similar thing. But what I like is stable coins such as DAI, like that. It provides, the stability. You don't have the value fluctuations, but it provides all the benefits of the instant transmission, the blockchain, all that kind of stuff. So I think not enough people are talking about stable coins. It's all talking about the ones that go up and down and, oh, it's a pump
Yeah,
and dump.
because people can make all kinds of money from it. I mean, they said, imagine, that first pizza delivery that, the Bitcoin owner,
Yeah.
he tipped the pizza boy, and that is actually now worth something like 30 million, that tip.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think just societally, I might be more excited about stable coin than coins that trade. They're both important, especially because as the US dollar's power fluctuates for a variety of reasons, you're seeing the rise, and Bitcoin, the more that people trust it, the more powerful it becomes. In my opinion, the days of the US dollar being the dominant currency are to some extent numbered for a variety of reasons, assuming current trajectories don't change. Um, so do you see like Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency becoming the new world bearing standard, or does China's currency take over, or the euro, or what
You,
do you think the future of currency is, I guess?
well, it's going to depend on quite a few politicians and what they decide over the next several years. You cannot roll out China's dollar. You cannot. Uh, they are investing heavily in Africa, where Europe and the United States has not.
Mm-hmm.
They're building corporations there. They're building just massive engineering structures in Africa. So you're going to have the whole continent of Africa, which is going to lean more towards China and their political. And just think about all those countries when they get together and they vote in the UN for things. So, we cannot roll out the Chinese whatsoever.
No, no. But what is more concerning to me than the current Chinese currency is when China comes out with, they either are developing or will soon be, the Chinese cryptocurrency. When they develop their own, I'm more worried about that being the standard than the yen.
Well, right now, the market, how people see digital currency is more, they see it as a stock.
I'm thinking more like 50-ish years from now. Like I
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
the US dollar is
that's a
not
big leap.
falling anytime. Well, I'm thinking when the US dollar eventually, at some point in time, the world is going to say, they've inflated it to, or, for whatever reason, we're going to move away from either a centralized currency or from this centralized currency. So I was just curious what your
And
forecast would be. And then we
don't
also have corporate crypto as well in play.
and don't forget about the European market, the euro. There being some type of euro crypto as
Yeah,
well,
okay, yes. They're
backed
all
by the EU.
state-based cryptos from basically all major states. So
Right.
so what becomes the new, I mean, because everyone right now agrees, there's a worldwide consensus that the dollar is king. But what happens in a world where there is not a consensus on what is king? Is that chaos or is that decentralized?
It's opportunity for someone else.
What do you think? I don't know. What do you think that is the best? Do you think the United States should develop its own cryptocurrency,
They
or should
have.
we focus? Or
They
should we?
actually they actually
Okay.
have. There is they haven't gone public. It hasn't gone out yet, but there is one that will be tied almost directly to the US dollar.
Okay. Well then I think at the end of the day we need to focus on saving the dollar. But that's, a whole nother rabbit hole. So I try not to go down too many rabbit holes, if you will. Another thing, there's multiple sides to this crypto thing. On the other side of it is your NFTs, your non-fungible tokens, which is a whole nother, I think, really exciting development for society for a variety of reasons. And I was specifically talking with an artist. And like right now, if you're a traditional artist and you want to sell your work, you have to find some website that'll take 30 to 40%. And then when you find someone, you have to hope that their check doesn't bounce. And then you have to trust them and they have to trust you. All these different problems. But with an NFT, you create your NFTs, the second they hit buy, instant transaction, trustless. I don't know. What's your take on NFTs?
Uh, you know, it was NFTs were really based off of that PayPal type of model. You really didn't have a way to do international buying and selling unless you did wire transfers. In like you were talking into one bank to another, it took days. PayPal came along and changed that overnight, where you can do transfers and they acted as the third party for that.
Yeah.
So, and if you notice, PayPal has also started to get into digital currency. So they kind of see themselves as a leader in that market for transactions. They'll guarantee everything's safe back and forth.
Yeah, and well, one thing that really pops out to me as that should be NFT'd, for lack of better wording. I think things like real estate titles or things of ownership, anything of ownership can now be digitized to, the reason these things haven't been digitized yet is because it's not secure. The reason we don't do, house titles online is because it's too easy right now for some 13-year-old to hack in and now he owns your house. But
in addition to that, there's also state laws that have not changed in 40, 50, 60, 70 years. For example, it is illegal to buy property online in Pennsylvania. You could go through lawyers and have lawyers do transactions if you're out of state, but you cannot buy property online. Say it's being put on eBay or some other site. It's being offered through realtor.com. They're doing the sales. You have to actually have
what's the argument for that?
The argument was they're going back to so they know who it is that's actually buying. So no one can be a real silent partner in ventures in Pennsylvania, but businesses found ways to get around that. So you have dummy corporations, and who it's really hurt all the time is the average buyer buying a house, and they've got to pay more fees because of that too.
Yep. I would definitely agree with you there. Kind of branching off a little bit what we were talking about. Now you've been kind of, if you will, inside different parts of the government. You've seen different parts of the elephant, if you will. And I think we would both agree that the United States government is very behind on its technology and technology infrastructure. Would you agree?
Oh, I'd agree wholeheartedly.
Now, one specific thing that I pulled up here, the Office of Technical Assessment was closed in 1995, before I was born. So all the technology was made. We didn't need to assess it anymore. What has been the biggest, factor or obstacle for us? Okay, I guess the simple question is, why are we so far behind?
Well, with us, everything has to be approved through the FCC. The FCC has taken over that role as putting their stamps on or off technology that's used within the United States. So, and the FCC is very politically appointed boards and
Yep.
directors. So when a new fraction comes into office, they may have corporations backing them that want to go one way. Okay, so we're 3-4 years in the office and we have another. So then we change governments and we
Back
have
and forth, back and
back
forth.
and forth, back and forth, and we don't get stuff done. And
Well, I think you see that a
that
lot in
would
the
also,
federal government.
yeah, and that would also go with cyber crimes. Your average police officer does not have the background to investigate cyber crimes
No.
whatsoever. There needs to be a whole division that is set up that we found out. A couple buddies we busted someone on Facebook Marketplace selling vehicles that weren't the right vehicles.
Hmm.
And stolen vehicles at that, and they were using the internet in order to do it. They would take down their Facebook Marketplace stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you would see this really good price, say, for example, Harley Davidson Softail. And you're like, oh, wow, that's a really good price. And then you'd see where they're located, and there's no car dealership located where they say they're located. And the price is really good. And they want to do online business, not in person business. Hey, you can buy it now through such and such, and we'll have it shipped to you. Or,
Yeah.
it was a ripoff. There is no way for someone, even with a doctorate in information systems, to be able to report a cybercrime that is actually happening right here and now without going to the local police, the state police, or going through a whole bunch of channels at the FBI. And by the time they have the resources to investigate, they've already closed down and they're going someplace
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. Those are like, they just pick like a fake name. I mean, I've seen them, they pick some random person on Facebook, steal their profile picture, flip their first and last name, and, you know,
Yeah, I've busted several help people that have been taken advantage through those type of love crimes too, where someone's reaching out and it's a little old lady and they've milked tens of thousands of dollars out of her.
oh yeah, there's a YouTube channel called Jim Browning where he like they'll do the fake IT scams where they'll make you
Mm-hmm.
think it's, and then they'll get the control. Well, basically he's good enough that he sets up a virtual computer that they can't tell is virtual because they're just like, self-taught, don't actually know what they're doing. And basically he back checks them, and he at one point, it was a couple times where he just like he put a picture of the scammer and his family like on his desktop so that when the scammer logged in, he saw himself. And he was just like, oh, or like he'll call them by their real names because they'll be like, they'll be clearly Indian, but they'll be like, my name's Alex Smith or something like that. And it's just, so it sounds like you like to do a little bit of that too.
Yeah, I do that on the side. I volunteer to do that, and I've been approached by a
because you,
couple
because you
organizations
feel
to
that
help
there's
out.
not anyone else doing that, basically.
That
Are you the
that and
Batman?
that and there's no office that does it, that actually understands, has the background training in it. The NSA would, but the NSA does not actually have a law enforcement body to it.
Well, I would even, okay, so even in the specific example you gave, um, does wouldn't Facebook have a responsibility to be clamping down on that? And B, is would we need to legislate that Facebook is responsible, or should it be some other agency and that's not Facebook's responsibility?
You know what? They're pulling off just some of the oldest scams that's been used for thousands and thousands of years. All of a sudden that prince that lost his principality
Yeah,
shows up in a village, and coys the old ladies out of their money by being charming and
Hmm.
all kinds of stuff, and promises they're going to go away and do this or that, and all of a sudden, she gives them thousand
Yeah, yeah,
dollars,
yeah.
$10,000, and I'll meet you there. That's one of the oldest cons
Yeah.
in
I
history.
remember getting those emails in the early 2000s from princes and princesses.
Charles, I don't know if you've ever seen it. Charles Veach does a really good uh, thing on that. He actually uh, did dialogue back and forth over email with the scammers, and he's very entertaining.
So what would I guess hold on, I want to make sure I say this right. What would be your suggestion for how we can catch up as fast as possible? Just
Well,
in generally speaking, I mean, to say that we're generally behind in tons of aspects, we could sit here all day and shoot every fish in the barrel of the 10,000 things that we're behind on. But what do you think would be one thing, maybe like, do we create a whole new department, like the Department of Technology or something like that at the federal? I don't know. What would you suggest?
well, you're getting there. One, there has to be a national CIO, first of all, and
Hmm.
that should be part of the president's cabinet, and that person should be as equal to the Secretary of State or any of the other offices,
Hmm.
Secretary of Defense or any of the other offices that we had. And we have a problem where we have a very large population compared to a lot of the different worlds, and it's spread out geographically in an area that would take up, all of Europe or China and more. So with our geographic
And it's the most
problems,
diverse population
correct,
on Earth.
running cable, um, there's areas in Pennsylvania that still do not have cable. They have to rely on satellite dishes. Uh, the northern counties in north central counties in Pennsylvania, it's so mountain. There's so many mountains there, and there's such a small population. For example, one county has 6,000 people for the whole county.
So the
It's
profit
not
margin isn't there for the private sector.
right. The money's just not there to run cable or other things too.
And I think that's the kind of stuff that's being included in right now. That as we record this, they're still debating they're working on that infrastructure bill. Joe Biden's, well, it's kind of like a two-parter. One part is infrastructure, and one is infrastructure. I would argue that is hard infrastructure. Broadband internet, all that kind of stuff. Um, Something else that we're way behind on. We'll never be able to catch up, let alone lead, if we can't, one problem that we have to fix, first of all, is, the old metaphor about you can use the bucket to take the water out of the boat, but until you fix the hole in the bottom. So until we fix our cybersecurity, we'll never get anywhere because China will always have a five-finger discount.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Now you're opening a huge can of worms
Yep.
when you're talking about that. Um,
That worms we can't
yeah,
necessarily with.
the single most damaging thing to the United States as an entity is the amount of cyber espionage and theft that is going on. Uh, and over the last couple years, you're talking to a tune of close to 500 billion, half $1 trillion being lost in intellectual property and other things of that
And it's a
nature.
ripple effect too, because
Correct.
now it's gotten to the point, specifically Apple, um, China says to them, either you come here and you play ball, or we're going to just make our own. And I don't, if you're the head of a tech company, what do you do in that situation? Because,
It's
you
we
know,
need to on a world stage. We're in cyber warfare every day. Um,
absolutely.
And I use this example when I'm teaching. I was just teaching a couple master students last semester in an MBA program. This said, okay, imagine a bunch of Chinese soldiers paratroop in downtown Cleveland. They walk into Key Bank, steal money, and then they get pulled out of there and they're gone. Would you declare that an act of war? Well, in most cases, the students would say yes.
Yeah.
They've done, but we don't consider it that when it's on the cyber side.
Oh, it's a digital Red Dawn 20 times a day.
Right. So some things need to change. We don't do it, one, because if it happens to a publicly traded company, say Apple or some other large, say Firestone, Goodyear, for example. Goodyear gets, and I know they've been hacked. Goodyear reports, hey, we've been hacked. What happens to their stock on Wall Street?
Bam.
It tanks, and it tanks in a big way. So these corporations won't come forward and say anything unless they're forced to by someone else, or some business deal forces them to come clean and says, oh yeah, by the way, we lost this, or we're hacked by this.
So you're saying it probably happens a lot more than we even know.
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does. And we need to change those laws that, for example, a company should be able to come forward, such as Goodyear, and say, hey, we've been hacked. This is how they do it, and share that knowledge with the rest of the United States so we can update and do the things to prevent how they were hacked. And their stock should be frozen if they're a publicly traded company.
Now you're messing with rich people's money, and that's a no-go.
Well, no, actually, you're saving people's money. It's not that you're messing with it. You're actually, no one can take Goodyear stock out. No one can buy it. It is on a hold for 6, 7, 8 months till the problem is fixed. We've shared what happened with the FBI and other corporate partners that are out there. And now, after 8 months, we can get back up and going and trade again. It may take a short dive, or depending on what they did, that stock may take off again.
I mean, I'm just thinking, I don't know. I see an argument from the other side coming in that a business would argue that maybe a 6-month freeze on share prices would be more detrimental than a drop and raise, because then they could buy back at a low. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm just thinking what the alternate argument would be.
Yeah, there's those that are out there that do that buy low, and they're betting against the market that corporate stock is going to go low.
Well, I'm talking about the company buying their own stock back at a low price, because corporate stock buybacks are the move du jour these days.
Well, so then that's why you have corporations hiding all the hacks that they have. There was a hack 2 years ago with the Cleveland Clinic, and a virus was implanted into the Siemens MRI machines. Now, what are you going to do with a virus in an MRI machine? You can cause a lot of problems depending who that person is that's in that MRI machine at the time. Hey, Senator. Hey, Prince of Saudi Arabia. If you don't do what we're going to tell you to do, your wife that's in the MRI machine right now, we're going to cook her from the inside out, because we're going to spin that magnet more than it should be.
Well, and this story turned out to be false, but there was a fake story going around about, I guess there are, I don't know if these products even exist, but basically it's some kind of chastity belt that is for some reason hooked up to Wi-Fi, like some force lock chastity belt that you have to unlock with. Basically, the story was that they got their chastity belts hacked, and they had to ransom out they had to ransom their junk back, basically. Turned out not to be a true story, but similar concept. Would you agree?
There's the possibility to that, or, pacemakers,
That's the one I was thinking of.
pacemakers, or the
Well, I
implanted
mean, most people have
machines
their
for
whole
diabetes.
homes. The whole homes are set up to it.
Or think about someone that's got diabetes
Mm-hmm.
insulin pump that is monitored by the doctor's office.
Well,
Hey,
with so much more stuff, the more stuff we connect to the internet, the more stuff is vulnerable.
correct. And we're not, as you said earlier, addressing the laws. The latest really major law that ever happened was the Digital Millennium Act. We're talking about 2004.
I mean, and even that, as issues with copyrighted content on the internet have been, ongoing issues to this day. I mean, a little side note, I watch a YouTuber who, he covers like movies, and he covered like the original Mortal Kombat movie, and it had like maybe 10 seconds of the, the theme song. Well, they
Right.
copyright flagged it and, took all his earnings. So he literally himself, and I know you'll love this, he recorded the entire theme song, like with different cuts of himself, either playing the drums or playing the saxophone. We created the entire song, we uploaded it, got flagged again, even though he made the song. So still issues with that, but that's kind of a side story. Um, anyway, kind of moving on a little bit into just what we were talking about in general. This what we refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. Is that terminology is that kind of common phraseology or not really?
Not really. The MBA houses, those are the houses that generally like to put a name tag on everything.
Well,
You
I
know,
mean,
they're the ones that put the name tag on data analytics and made it the hot topic it is. So we, Fortune magazine and all those business related, Wall Street Journal has yet to really put a label on what it is that's happening. And that's a first too.
but
Because
would you, label aside, would you agree we're in a period of industrial transition?
absolutely, absolutely.
And I mean, I'm not, I don't want to get into political stuff too much, but I was a big fan of Andrew Yang when he was running, and he was bringing up, issues. I feel like most of politics is still stuck in the 1990s for the most part. And he was one of the ideas that I thought I wanted to get your take on is he brought up the idea of a world data organization. So, we recognize that data is basically the most valuable commodity. Instead of us, all the countries trying to hide it from each other and just, as much as China steals from us, we're stealing from other, and everyone's stealing from anybody. Instead, let's put it all together where we could all work together to secure it. And then if, someone like a China or a Russia or a North Korea, if someone wants access to all the data, then you have to play ball. You can't be having genocide camps. You can't be making, what's your, but then the flip side of that is you see specifically this year the issues with worldwide organizations like the WHO. So I guess given those two counterpoints, what would your take be on that kind of idea?
Knowledge has also always been money. Yeah, that has been, the more you know about something, someone's willing to pay you for that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of data brokers and all, it's got some legs, but there's a lot to it because people tend to share. Hey, I bought this, so how about I share it with you? You got
Sure.
one country that you need to vote my way for stuff like this, and I'll share this with you. So you may have an Iran that goes out there and they've got the money to buy something, and they say, okay, Pakistan, okay, Syria, okay, fill in
This
the
at least
blank.
provides them an alternate route where instead of having to pay for it, they can just stop committing human rights
Well,
violations.
no, they would probably do more because then you're going to have the most powerful rich companies that are able to buy the data saying, okay, come along to our way of thinking and we'll give you access.
Hmm. Okay.
That's always going to be in human nature. We
Sure.
never will have I like to call it the Star Trek um,
Yeah,
mentality, where it's one world and
I know.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
I agree. I don't know. I think maybe I think too much about it for a 24-year-old, but I'm always scratching my head of, how do we get China to the table? How do we get North Korea to the table? Not just to the table meaningfully, to the table where they actually want to stop doing I can sit here and list atrocious things the Chinese government has done, but that's not going to help anyone at the moment, you know? And that was the first real idea where I was like, well, information actually is the one thing that might, we can't economically sanction them because at this point, their economy is bullying ours. The NBA, Facebook, all they have to kowtow to China, not to us.
Or even think about institutions of higher learning. How many really big name colleges and universities have places in the Middle East, or they have places in China? Duke, for example, NYU does.
And they
Princeton.
receive funding through these, shell corps we were talking about. The Chinese government sends funding to all these top colleges, and then, who's going to write a story about China? No one.
And I've had friends that have taught there. Um, Cheating is rampant, absolutely rampant. Uh, and you're
Just to clarify, you mean academic cheating, correct? Not
academic
relationship
cheating,
cheating.
um, business cheating, it, anything to make China's. It used to be China said, we're going to make things for the rest of the nation. Now China's is saying we are going to be the creator of things, and they want that by 2024. That is their goal. That they
Well,
will no longer need Western nations' ideas or technology. That they are going to be doing it in house in China.
I mean, I know that concerns you, but that concerns me especially. I mean, especially as I look at the news of what's going on in Myanmar, what's going on I'm very concerned about the possibility of China annexing large parts of Eastern Asia. They're
Well,
already doing soft gentrification of a lot. I've heard stories of not, Vietnam, Thailand, a couple places. They're just Chinese nationals are just buying up all the valuable property, and they're doing a soft gentrification buyout.
well, that happened down in Texas. A Chinese company bought West Texas's oil fields, the single largest oil fields in the lower 48 states. And the Texas government and the United States allowed a Chinese company to come in and buy it.
Why? Was it ignorance or malice?
Money. They
So
offered,
malice.
yeah, they offered them the right amount of money, and they said, okay.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, we chase the short, we get cheaper TVs, but now no one has the jobs to make them.
Yep,
So, I
absolutely.
mean,
When we're
well,
think about
talking chain of supply, semiconductors, semiconductor supply. What can I get your take on that? Because that's a huge issue on the rise.
yeah, we keep what we do and what corporations like Intel have done for years is they go to the cheapest country they can find in order to build those. For the longest time, it was China. Now it's no longer China. Now it's Thailand and other
Taiwan
countries
is a
there.
big
And
producer of
yeah,
superconductors.
and that presents a problem because for the longest time, the Chinese government was able to put um, viruses directly into semiconductors themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to add things. You know, we sold the Humvees. The Army uses Humvees. We sold that to China and then expected to turn around and buy these off China. Well, they came in with listening devices and tracking devices. You
Yep.
know,
Well, I believe it was in your class, which I don't know if I clarified this for the listeners. I was actually a student of Dr. Bradshaw when I was attending Thiel College. I think you mentioned to me, what was it, the Belgian Parliament? They found like 12 sniffers or something like that.
MC devices. Yep.
So I mean, it's not just China to us or us. It's everyone to a certain degree, it's everyone against everyone.
Yeah, it is. The FBI uses MZ devices all the time. I was watching a series last night, and for example, major airports will have MZ devices in the airport. So when you get off your airplane and you're starting to go through the airport and you turn your cell phone on, you connect to the MZ device, and then the MZ device goes out and connects to the towers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you're doing that, the MZ device can actually bring down viruses and put it on your cell phone. So then they can track you for when you're there.
Do you think it would be appropriate if we had a sixth branch of the military specifically focused on technology, instead of having, I know you and U.S. Army, they have their technology stuff, and Navy has their tech stuff, and Space Force. Do you feel like it'd be better if all the technology stuff was in its own branch, or does each branch need its own technology infrastructure?
Right now, they share the technology and infrastructure. There is a cyber command. Cyber command shares across all forces,
Okay.
but there needs to be a civilian cyber command as well.
So do you think it'd be appropriate to have it, like, to create a new branch of the military, or do you think maybe that's not appropriate?
You can argue on both ends that, yeah, there could be and probably should be, but then what happens to all those jobs that from the Navy, Army, Air Force,
Yeah,
the other branches,
Yeah, well, like I said, I think each branch still needs their own tech infrastructure to some degree, but then,
yeah.
this, like you said, the cyber warfare is the biggest war we're not going to be fighting with tanks and grenade launchers and mortars. We're going to be fighting with keyboards and mice. So with the job at hand, maybe that's the kind of response that would be appropriate. But at the end of the day, that's kind of a labeling thing.
And to really think about it in that terms too, the Navy, United States Navy, still owns a large portion of the dark web.
Really?
They were the developers of the dark web.
Hmm.
And they were using that so when spies were in different areas, they could send secure messaging back and forth using dark web technologies. Well, the problem with that is if you only have 1 or 2 or 3 or 100 people using that, it's easy to trace them. So they actually encouraged people to get on the dark web and use it. So then that trap becomes muddled. But the Navy still owns the majority of the dark web.
I was not aware of that. That's interesting. No, I'm just curious. If you know the truth, you probably couldn't even tell. So I'm going to just think aloud. I'm wondering if the Navy sells things on the dark web. I think of merchant marines and all that kind of stuff. I'm wondering if, well, I'm going to assume that we are, and I know you can neither confirm nor deny, so we'll move on. Anyway,
there's a real famous saying that when I first got into the area of special ops, that I had a sergeant major tell me, son, you're going to want to remember these words for the rest of your life. Senator, I do not recollect.
Right. Well, yeah, fair enough. Actually, that is kind of funny. You did mention to me in your bio that you have appeared as court witness before.
Correct.
I guess just kind of run me through what that experience was like, and then maybe if you had any interesting stories.
Well, since they're about actual cases, there are certain things that I can or cannot
Sure.
say.
As best as you can.
One of the cases I did involved a young man that was about to be charged with a whole slew of sexual assault crimes under Pennsylvania law. He had been texting back and forth with a young lady who said she was this age. when someone said, he was a young man too, says that they are that age, generally you don't say, okay, let me see your driver's license, go ahead and prove it. And especially if your Facebook profile and your Twitter accounts all say you're a certain age, you tend to believe that person about their age.
Okay.
So they were texting back and forth, and she initiated the conversation. She contacted him. She initiated the conversation on a more intimate level of
Just to
things that she
clarify,
wanted done.
she was under 18 and he was
She
above 18.
correct,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, okay. That's
And
what I figured.
so they met. He went, picked her up. They met. They had consensual sex at the time. She got caught sneaking in the back door by mom and dad when she got home. They looked at her cell phone, saw all that she had been going on. Mom went through and tried to erase all the conversations that she had initiated.
Okay.
So for a judge or someone looking at that information, all they would see is the young man's conversations, talking
Yeah.
about intimacy and things, which would have meant a higher charge under Pennsylvania law.
So how did you
So
become involved in this case?
the public defender that was assigned to him approached me
Okay.
and said, what can you do? So we went through and recalled all those messages that had been erased because they're still sitting out there on a server.
Sure.
And
They
so
were now if they had been using something like WhatsApp or some other encrypted, you would have been out of luck, correct?
WhatsApp has been broken.
Okay, bad example. And actually, if they were using an actually encrypted messenger,
Yeah.
would you
Yes.
still would it be impossible, or would there still be a way?
There's always still ways. There's software that can be used for recovery. It tells you when there's lines missing in
Oh,
things because the digital hashtag marker was there, and now all of a sudden something's missing from it.
encryption's not as magical as everyone. It still leaves enough breadcrumbs for you to
Right,
follow if you
right,
know what you're looking for.
absolutely.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Um, Encryption is we were talking about a little bit the fourth industrial revolution. One of those aspects. Oh, hello. Um, one of the biggest issues I think about this technological advance, which I don't know how we're going to reckon with, is the massive amount of job loss we're looking at. And there is argument with some value that new jobs will be created that we can't anticipate, of course. But with the nature of AI and automation and how they can, for lack of better wording, outperform humans in a variety of tasks that are essential for society, the number of jobs needing to be done by humans versus the number of humans in society is going to be disproportionate. And how do you think we can handle that?
Well, we have to reevaluate the type of jobs we have. We have to reevaluate the college system right now. Accounting jobs are over the next 8 years are going to be one of the biggest job loss markets in the United States.
Software.
AI can do your taxes for you. For example, you go down an H&R Block and IBM's Big Blue can do your taxes. All they do is scan the information in, and then it's read. IBM's Big Blue does your taxes and can file it right there for you.
Well, not to go down another rabbit hole, but technically the IRS could do our taxes for us, but IBM and all those lobbied so that that's not the case. But
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, and you're right about that. But so what about all those CPAs that were doing counting? That is going to be one of the major job losses over the next 8 years
That
that
and
you're going to start to see.
Truck driving is going to be a big one because those are people with high school degrees. That's the best job you can get without a college degree, and truck driving pays pretty gosh darn well for not having a college degree. And you got a lot of people who are, you know, it's going to be very soon. Amazon is going to be bringing those self-driving trucks out soon. They daisy chain to be air resistant. I mean, it makes economic sense for Amazon to do it.
Well, take a look. It was about 6 months ago. You had the first autonomous semi drive coast to coast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very possible they don't have to stop. They don't have to do anything compared to a regular person driving.
But that's 3.5 million truck drivers.
Yeah.
Most of whom
But
are, not quite to retirement age yet. So what do those people do?
truck driving is still, that's a new job, believe it or not, in the scheme of everything over the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be other jobs that we don't even know what they are.
Yeah,
think
sure.
about,
No, I agree with you.
Think about the jobs that are out there that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Sure. But what I think is unique about this transition is with the automation and the AI, physically and mentally, it is surpassing human, physically. There's not going to be any reason for anyone to be doing any kind of physical labor or any kind of, data passing. Administrative jobs are going to disappear as well. People who work for insurance companies, anyone whose job involves passing data is going to become redundant. So I don't know. Yes, you were right. We have to kind of fix how we educate people to head into the world and kind of change the kind of jobs that we find value in. I think we're going to hopefully find more value in jobs that serve other humans, because that is, the thing that we have to figure out what it is that machines can't do, basically.
There was a professor who died a couple of years ago, Neil Postman out of NYU. He wrote several books on the subject. He even predicted texting back in the 70s, how it was going to be. And part of that problem too is the degradation of communications. Think about the language that has been lost so far because, hey, we're texting, we pick up our phone, we're going to use icons sometimes for what we mean.
Sure.
How many people write back to you in text form instead of English form?
No, I had an author on a couple of weeks ago, and we agreed that inversely enough, as world literacy rates have risen, our collective vocabularies have shrunk.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
I think a big factor of that is another, probably one of the worst developments of the fourth industrial revolution. Social media, I think, has been a big part of just the degradation of nuance in general, let alone, vocabulary is nuance of speaking. So,
yeah, there's some good and there's some bad to it.
Sure, it's not all bad, but it's by far the highest percentage of bad, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of the things with social media, it can put spotlight focus on some things that are happening. We've had stuff that has been talking about murders or anything that's been happening since the beginning of time with man.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to make like third or fourth page in the paper, something that happened, say, a couple cities over or a couple states over. Now with social media, when something happens, we can share it real time. So there's more, and we've seen it, there's more of a focus on, hey, this is a problem. A lot of people are saying falsely that the United States society is actually more violent and there's more crimes. No, actually it's not. If you look at FBI crime statistics, it has been in steady decline since the 70s. We are just putting more focus and sharing what's going on across the United States and across the world now.
Sure. And I think that you spot on. That's probably been one of the biggest impacts, not just with keeping in touch with people, but sharing, viral news or whatever. I would describe it as decentralizing who gets to, decentralizing news, which our current national media complex is in shambles right now because everyone's cutting the cables, and they don't
Yeah,
know. And the
there's no
click,
revenue.
well, the ad-based model has, in many degrees, come back to bite many things in the butt, specifically media. And that's an unfortunate aspect of the development of the internet. I would argue, and I think you would agree, we've become much more advertiser centric in the last 20 years. Advertisers rule the world now.
Well, they did, and if you go back and you look at newspapers and TV shows from the 50s, it was nothing but advertising. In the middle of a show, hey, today's show is sponsored by Trident. Today's show is sponsored by Aquafresh or
But I would argue
or
that it's pervade more because more stuff has gone online, and almost everything online is ad centric. I would argue that we've become that much more. Yeah, you're right. It has always been part of. I mean, salesmanship is part of the American DNA. Snake oil salesman is one of the most American characters you'll ever meet. I love the character of the snake oil salesman. But anyway, um, I would like to switch topics just a little bit here, to your time. And once again, if you need to step around things, just let me know. To your time, you mentioned that you served in the capacity of psychological warfare. If you were to define that, the average person might not know. How would you explain that to the average Joe? What is psychological warfare?
psychological warfare is anything that can be used in a non-conventional manner to disrupt your enemy. Now, for example, one of the more famous things that Psyops units, Army Psyop units ever did was when they went down to Panama to get Noriega.
Mm-hmm.
They surrounded his palace with loudspeakers and played rock music 24/7 until at deafening decibels till finally he came out and surrendered. We've used psychological warfare using speakers again. For example, we went out to spots in the middle of Iraq, and during the night, we would go out in the middle of the night and we would have recordings of tanks. So to the local villagers, it would sound like tanks were moving in a completely different direction than they
Mm-hmm.
were.
Okay.
So then the local Taliban member or the local whoever that was selling information would say, "Hey, the U.S. troops are on the move. They're going this way," and it would be a false
It
information.
also creates a sense of paranoia, I'm sure.
Right. Now it could be leaflet drops. Surrender. We've got one of the most famous things back in the first Persian Gulf War. The Iraqis attempted to do that to U.S. troops. And one of the most hilarious ones they ever did was Bart Simpson's at home with your girlfriend while you're here serving.
Okay.
Not realizing that Bart Simpson was a cartoon character.
Yeah. No.
And
Okay. I'll give him a C for effort, I guess.
then there's electronic psyops where you can embed messages in electronic medium.
Mm-hmm.
You can stream things through their internet and disrupt what they're doing. You can make them hear and see things, and what we talk about, take control of houses or
Mm-hmm.
other things that derive media in order to mess with people. But you're not using weapons in order to do it.
Yes. Now, would you agree that psychological warfare has been around as long as time itself?
Oh, absolutely. You could go back to the Romans and Julius Caesar, and they all used those type of tactics.
Sure. I mean, I can think specifically of, the Scots all dropping their kilts and mooning the Englishmen or something like that. Or, it's funny. It's funny you gave that loudspeaker example because I'm a huge soccer guy. In soccer, that's actually a very well known and well trodden tactic where the ultras will set off fireworks outside the opposing team hotel at 3 a.m. to wake them up. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, and so you see psychological warfare outside of warfare. I mean, I might go a step farther and say we're all, in certain sense, in a free-for-all of psychological warfare with all of each other at the same time, except maybe like our families.
No,
To a
there's
certain
a lot of
extent.
families where that dynamic
Well,
is there.
okay, not the word family. Unless there's someone that you're 100% true with, you are to a certain extent engaged in psychological warfare. Would you say that's accurate?
That can be very accurate.
A soft warfare, if you will, but all social interactions are seen as, you know, power, if you will. Not to get too psychological, but that's kind of what you guys are going for, is the power of interactions. You are destroying them through interactions instead of metal and lead.
Well, think about even Khan, Mongolian leader,
Mm-hmm.
as he went through Genghis Khan, as he went through and started taking over European countries and areas, he would, their spears and arrows would be tipped with manure. So
Well, that actually has battle effective.
yeah, it has battle effective, but you would hear the herds coming and you would know that if you stood and tried to fight, that would be something that could take your life. Even a small injury could turn into something that
It
was
might
life
be a
threatening.
shitty situation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's also when you had Vlad the Impaler in Romania come along, because he used to cut the heads
Mm-hmm.
off of Genghis Khan's soldiers and put them on sticks at the front or down roads to try to intimidate.
And then at one point, I want to say Romania, but I might be wrong. The large suzerain of the larger nearby city-state, his army came because they didn't like what Vlad was doing, and they arrived to see a forest of 10,000 headless bodies on stakes, and they just turned around. They're like, I'm not messing with this dude. So
There is
it's
all
not just offensive,
aspects.
it's defensive
Yeah,
as well.
there are all kinds of aspects to it. But the United States, it's a federal law, and after the last couple elections, the United States government is not allowed to psyop its own people.
Um, if you say so.
That is a federal
Did
law.
anyone tell Jen Psaki that?
Yeah, and considering our past administration that just went out, they were using psychological warfare tactics
Every
on,
single day.
yes, they were, fake media. This is fake. This isn't true. That this isn't, they were using those tactics. And
Yeah, I
there
agree with you.
there is some grievance that
But
maybe
I
in a,
think there's a counter argument that CNN is doing, if not, I mean, not to the same degree, but actually, there's just a story came out. The head of NBC News sits on the board of Walmart. The head of their news
that's
division
common.
sits on the
That's
board of
common.
Walmart.
Yeah.
So, and then NBC doesn't cover Walmart, and Walmart gets away with this and that. Is that not, well, is that a form of psychological warfare, or is that more legislative warfare?
That is the buddy system.
Yeah,
And
that's cool. Yeah,
you
crony.
have you have leaders of corporations sitting on other leaders' boards,
Mm-hmm.
so there,
Or you get out of your government job and you have a board position lined up. Not
yeah,
to get too into specifics, but a lot of the Obama administration was buddy buddy with certain things. But anyway, would you say now when I was doing a little bit of research on psychological warfare, the word that was popping up in my mind a lot was propaganda. Would you say that propaganda is a branch of psychological warfare?
oh, it's part of it.
Kind of
Absolutely
like a
part of it.
square is a rectangle or an integer is rational. It's part of a larger subset.
Absolutely, absolutely. You were developing a campaign to disrupt your target audience.
And
And
kind of
that could take multiple forms.
going back to what we were talking about with China, where it's been talked about lately, where Hollywood is making their movies for Chinese censors, and that's a form of almost self-inflicted psychological warfare, where instead of China making all the movies, they're just going to make all the movies hold Chinese values. Someone was pointing out, when's the last time you saw a movie about Tibet come out of Hollywood? 20 plus years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
There's colleges where the Dalai Lama is not allowed to visit because it would upset the Chinese students. Well, I'm not the Chinese people. I have nothing against the Chinese people. It's the Chinese Communist Party. I've met plenty of people from China, all lovely, wonderful people. I'm talking specifically about the government. Just wanted to clarify that.
And we as the United States do the same thing. Our hardline religious right side, for example, the Dalai Lama was here in Western Pennsylvania a couple years back and wanted to talk at Slippery Rock High School.
Really?
The board would not let him because they said he is a religious person and we're not going to let him talk.
Yeah.
So we do the same thing.
I strongly disagree, but I depending on how much of a good faith argument that is, I could see if they were really trying to stay neutral, I could see it as an ignorant argument, but I don't think it was a good faith. If it was good faith, it was ignorant, but I don't believe it was. And that's all I'll say about that. Would you say, now you might say no thank you to this question. Would you say that American modern Psyops for the United States, do you think like the modern chapter that began after Operation Paperclip, where we took in, because the Nazis were specifically harsh in psychological warfare, do you think, the integration, after World War II and the breakup of Nazi Germany, us and the Soviets, we were all fighting over the scientists and all that stuff. And, psychology has a very strong root in Germany. Do you think that started a new chapter for American Psyops, or was it not as big of a factor as I'm building it up to be?
It was not that big of a factor then. U.S. troops saw a lot of it in Korean War. We didn't have active components in the Korean War, but the Chinese did. If you've ever watched a series called MASH,
I know of it, but it's a little old for me.
MASH is a medical unit, and that was a story about it. But they would receive radio transmissions from the certain lady who is telling them to give up and everything else. And then the Vietnam War came along, and the Vietnam War probably was the epitome of what Psyops is on both sides. It was used heavily. We used it heavily. They used it heavily. That was really the first time the United States really actively took it as a component of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And then we definitely used it in
the Gulf and the Middle East,
Gulf War and
Iraq,
absolutely.
To this day, obviously.
Yeah, we used it in Panama when we went in there.
Mm-hmm. Do you see? Obviously, most of your experiences come from the federal or military level. Do you see like police stations or more local levels? Do you see them taking on psychological tactics? Is that something being implemented more throughout, or is that still more of a federal thing?
I'm going to pass on that one.
Excellent. Switching topics a little bit, one of the degrees in your many of degrees, which 2 claps for you on that sticks out is you have the BS in music. So I'm curious, what exactly does one study to get a BS in music?
Well, my area of music that I got my undergrad in is in saxophone with a minor in clarinet. your music degree, consists of music theory, music history. You have to take piano, you have to take conducting lessons, you have to take lessons, you have to perform. And then after my bachelor's been done, and while I was working on it, I've become really heavy into synthesizers and other electronic recording equipment,
Okay.
using Pro Tools and other equipment for audio engineering
Are you familiar
purposes.
with Fruity Loop Studio?
Yes, yes.
I've had a couple of independent like EDM music or hip hop producers, like guys that I went to college with, who, well, actually, you might have had a couple of them in class, honestly, but it's
Well,
kind of like,
there's that. Another popular one is GarageBand. It's easy to use. You can do a lot of things. Pro Tools is the big production one. Pro Tools, you will see large recording studios using
Mhm.
that, as well as someone with their laptop right here can use it.
So which and what all instruments do you play to any level?
Um, Saxophone wise, I've played with symphonies. I've played with big band jazz bands. I've played with local community concert bands and jazz bands and things like that. When I was in college, I got to play with Dizzy Gillespie. I've got to play with Doc Severinsen, um, uh, famous drummer from The Tonight Show was Ed Shaughnessy. I've gone to play with him.
So
So
saxophone is your main,
saxophone is my main.
regular Bill Clinton, eh? But you also
Not
mentioned,
really.
uh, well, yes, obviously not. But you also mentioned clarinet. Anything else?
Correct. Um, I was in a drum and bugle corps when I was in high school, early years of college, called the Phantom Regiment. They're pretty one of the big names that are out there,
Hmm?
and I played mellophone with them. I've played trumpet as well, but I also do conducting of organizations.
Would maybe this is kind of an ignorant question. Would you say the saxophone is? Do you enjoy playing it the most? Do you enjoy
Yeah,
playing one instrument more than others?
that's sax is my more comfort zone too.
Well, then I guess
You
my
know,
question, the interesting question is, what makes playing the saxophone more enjoyable to you than playing the trumpet? Is it just that you're better and more experienced and can do more, or is there a certain feel to the saxophone that you appreciate?
uh, I love the sound. I love trumpet. You've got three valves. With the saxophone, I've got multiple pads and keys that I can do different tones. Then add mouthpieces. My mouthpiece collection alone is probably about $10,000 just in mouthpieces, different reeds, different
And those all
ligatures,
pronounce different sounds.
all create different sounds.
So would you say the saxophone is very versatile and that's why you like it?
Absolutely. It's not as maybe recognized as it should be by modern orchestras, although I've played sax with orchestras before.
I think it's
Um,
more people mentally section it off into the jazz section. Would you agree?
Jazz, blues,
Yeah.
and R&B. There is a huge sax venue within the R&B community.
Well, I think those all kind of come from the same roots, Harlem, and I think all those kind of. I'm a huge rap and hip hop fan, but I kind of acknowledge how those all kind of bubbled out of the same roots, if you will, and then kind of spread differently. But you can still see the connection between all those kind of. Yeah.
There's videos out there actually on YouTube that you could go out and certain guys are using their saxophone to beatbox with. There is probably right now one of the top saxophones in the country came out of Pittsburgh, um, and he's known worldwide now. He's Leo P. Um, Leo Pellegrini is his full name,
Hmm.
and he went to the Manhattan School of Music, and his primary instrument is Barry saxophone. Now, he played with his group their initial start was on playing for subways in New York. They would go and they would put on productions and they'd make a serious amount of money by
Hmm.
doing this when they were in college. Well, he just played a couple of years ago with the London Philharmonic for their proms. And he came out and did this piece and just knocked it out of the park. This guy holding a big Barry saxophone can dance like you wouldn't believe while playing. He's a pretty interesting character. And I think he's taking the instrument and the voice, and he's making sounds with it that I can't even begin to comprehend how he's getting that sound out of that instrument. And this combination of beatboxing and playing.
So would you agree that you could never master an instrument? There's always more improvement, or could
There's
you
there's always, always, always more improvement.
can never perfect an instrument?
Absolutely.
I think I'd agree
It,
with you. Well, I don't know. The bass drum, I'd make argument. I did percussion in middle school. I got stuck on bass drum. It was a lot of and waiting for bars, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but I think the bass drum is a bit more masterable than maybe a drum set. But
not
anyway,
think think of the Japanese um, music companies or production companies that go around and do Japanese traditional music that have bass drums. And it is well beyond standard 1-4-1-4
uh,
or 1-3 hit, you
well, I
know.
mean, I was providing backup to hot cross buns, to be fair. Which actually is kind of goes into the topic that I wanted. A lot of school districts at some point, be it in middle school or high school, have some kind of musical requirement, 1 year or two. My first question is, how do you feel about music being required for students?
I think it should be, uh, um, just like art should be as well. Uh, Everybody's home environment that they grew up is different. And so when you get exposed to something else, more doors open that you may not have known exist anymore. And by doing so, you also create a music appreciation uh, group. You know, there's a lot of kids that are marching band don't may never pick up an instrument again after they're done with marching band in high school, but they have the appreciation for live music and
Oh,
for live
always
sound
remember what a
that's out
paradiddle
there.
is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but I don't know. I generally agree with you. My only counter thought is that it needs to be at the right time for them. And, because it's a school environment, we have to standardize it and say, okay, everyone has to learn it at this grade or whatever. Well, for
Hmm.
some kids, that'll be the right spot. And, for a lot of kids, I think I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, I did blah, blah, blah in middle school because I had to, but now I wish I could, I think specifically in something like music or art, it kind of needs to hit someone at the right time.
Well,
So
that's kind of the same. We teach languages wrong in the United States. Foreign languages should be taught, and there's every single bit of evidence proves that foreign languages should be taught before students hit puberty. If they have that knowledge going into it, they retain it. Once you learn a foreign language after puberty starting, you don't comprehend it well enough.
because your mind is so structuralized.
Right, right.
That's interesting. Well, I've been trying to brush up on some of my high school Spanish with the Duolingo or whatever. So 15 minutes a day. But I don't know. I'm not trying to get fully literate, but I'm trying to get enough that I can communicate with people. Which
Hmm.
kind of a funny side story. I was listening to an episode of the Joe Rogan podcast where he had a guy named Josh Rogan, spelled differently, no relation. And it's kind of funny. He was talking about China a lot. You probably touched on a lot of topics, but he had been working for a Japanese newspaper in DC. And the only reason he was there is because he had lived in Japan for a couple years because he really liked ramen noodles. And then he had a journalism degree and he just landed up, all the real journalists, the Japanese ones, they just sent him to get the quotes. He was the English errand boy, basically.
Yeah.
But he lands at this job, and next thing first day he gets sent to the Pentagon and for Donald Rumsfeld. This was back in the W era, and so he does it basically barely fresh out of school journalism. Took 5 years off to eat ramen in Japan, and then he's back there. And they basically told him, just get a question, just anything about Japan. If you get him to respond to you, you did a great job. Well, this is right in the middle of a lot of stuff going on, and so Donald Rumsfeld calls on him, and he asks, some super flat, benign question about Japanese relations. And Rumsfeld, of course, hooks right on it because that's the easiest question he's going to get all day. He answers the Japan question for 35 minutes, spikes the press conference, and this goes on for 2 years. For 2 years, Rumsfeld, anytime he wants to get out of the press conference, he calls on this dude who barely even knows what he's doing there. He doesn't speak Japanese or anything. He'd just be like, so how's the Japanese relation going? And he'll just go for 30 minutes. And the dude was saying, I didn't know the fix was on until one day I didn't ask a question. And Rumsfeld stopped him in the hallway. He's like, hey, Josh, you feeling okay today, buddy? I could have really used you today. So, I mean, slightly related, but I really laugh out loud, and that made me laugh out loud. So,
Well, talking about education, K through 12, we don't teach computer science. Well, we require biology, we require physics sometimes. We require
priorities of what we teach. I often question. I think of how many times I learned the same thing multiple times. I don't know, like, if it's because the standards are constantly changing, like the Hogwarts staircase or what, but I don't understand how we end up in a situation where, I mean, learning about the Holocaust is important, but I must have learned about it at least 8 to 9 times during the course of high school.
Well, what I was kind of getting at, on the K through 12 level, we as a nation have not addressed technology education.
All right, fair enough.
Some school districts, they'll put students in a typing class and then maybe give them a word class, and that's it. That's their technology for K through 12. We do not have classes as a standard across the United States in programming or technology itself, building a PC or tearing one down,
Even
rebuilding
just
it as
basic
a class.
understanding.
Correct. Correct. And that's a national problem.
Because then you get a nation of how do we catch up if our citizens can't care about things they don't understand? So that ends up biting us in the ass 20 years down the road when we have adults that don't know it.
And the Chinese and those from the Philippines and other countries, they're getting programming classes starting when they're 12 years old.
Absolutely. Every brand new tutorial, if I'm trying to find a new tutorial on some kind of code thing or whatever, it's almost always someone in an Indian accent.
Yeah.
And that's not
absolutely.
like any kind of like, that's not bad or, whatever. It's just, that's what's being, pushed forward and it is a good alternative for someone in, a country where industry isn't physically there. The internet is how you, can escape.
Well,
that.
Too, and there's different trains of thoughts outside the United States. Only in the United States do we revere the medical doctors as being the top tier. If you go to every single other nation, just about in the rest of the world, engineers are the ones that are revered as being the top tier, not doctors.
Mm-hmm.
So all the creme de creme in the United States wants to become a doctor. We have an engineering shortage that not enough people are going through engineering school because they don't have the background about it and they don't know about jobs. Everyone's pushing medical. Well, we need more engineers to come up with the ideas for new products.
And for new technology to help the medical field.
Absolutely. So a lot of that engineering is happening with people from foreign countries because engineering is top in those countries.
And then if we don't, if we educate Chinese or foreign nationals here in this stuff, and then we really, not that we don't try to keep them, we almost actively encourage them to go back home with this knowledge, So the ones who come here and actually do want to learn here and are interested in staying and improving society and being we're sending those people back because I don't know. I don't want to get too into the immigration debate, but I think once, if we're college educating someone, they are now a positive asset to society, and we should be trying to hold on to them, not making them jump through 10 hoops to work some minimum wage job just to stay here when they've got, I worked with a lot of international, people, masters in financial evaluation, masters in this, and they're, doing cleaning toilets and all and stuff like that just because they're on this visa instead of whatever. And I think if the US wants to improve, we should be encouraging these people to stay, not trying to kick them out.
Well, in addition to that, we also need to, as a nation, really look at our technology education, and our engineering education, and reevaluate this whole new math. forget forget the new math. Go back to the old way of doing it.
There should be more emphasis on vocational schools and those type things. Would you agree? Schools that focus more on real skills. Maybe I'm not quite wording that correctly, but there should be more. There should be more of a spectrum between academic and practical.
Well,
Maybe.
there used to be, and then a lot of lawsuits happened that said, "Hey, you're tracking my kid." In other words, you're saying he doesn't fit the academic track in school.
Mhm.
So you're putting him in this track. Well, you're setting him up for a lifetime failure. That's when several years ago, well, it's been about 20, they got rid of the different tracks and it all became an academic track. And then if you want a vocational training, you go do that and you pay for it just like college. You go to an ITT Tech, you go to a VOTech, you learn about diesel repair, you learn about building houses or air conditioning.
But we
You have to pay.
separated those from,
Right.
stuff like the stuff that used to be in like a home ec class, or woodshop classes barely hanging on in some schools. I was fortunate enough
The
to have a
majority of
woodshop.
the majority of school districts around here do not have.
Yeah, but I was fortunate enough. I was able to do a woodworking class, and I don't know, just basic. When something falls apart in your home, can you self-sustainability? You would argue we
Yeah.
need to, and I argue that on a couple of different levels. I think the world would be a lot better off if more people grew their own produce. Just the gas mileage of shipping the stuff alone. Ideally you buy locally, but most people that's not an option. But you go just your tomatoes or something. I don't know. Just in general, we need people to be more self-sustainable.
Well, fortunately around here, there's a lot of Amish that you can buy a lot
Yes,
of
there are.
produce from the Amish, and that's locally grown and right out of their own fields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not like the pesticide. Well, and that's the other thing too with the profit motive. You always worrying about what corners are getting cut, and if enough people are out there checking to make sure said corners are not being cut. So, um, that's about all I have in terms of all of that stuff. I was gonna move on to my list of questions here. Did you have anything else you wanted to touch on in any of those topics?
No, I think we did pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say so too. Okay, so like I said, I like to I've been taking, I used to have people pick from the full list, but turns out people just keep picking the same numbers, 7, 23, 21, 17. So I pre-select 10 out now per the guest, and then I ask them to pick a number 1 through 10. So if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Bradshaw, pick a number 1 through 10.
9.
9. All right, and that's going to correspond to question number 83, which I'm going to go to my little list here. And, oh, this is fun. Is math something that humans invented or something that we discovered?
Oh, self-discovery. Math is not something that was invented. It was, you can really say there's a higher being in this, that God created math in a way, because everything here is on Earth is so mathematical. The universe is so mathematical, and understanding the real insight, I think, to God has to come through mathematics.
So it's mathematics is a force like gravity. Mathematics is as true as physics, you would say.
Correct,
That'd
correct.
be like saying that Isaac Newton invented gravity. He discovered it.
He discovered it.
Okay. So you feel like mathematics is an inherent force in the world, similar to gravity or any kind of physics or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Eh, fair enough. That one was a quick one. Some go quicker than others. So, would you mind picking me another one that isn't 9?
5.
43. And oh, this is a fun one because we were talking about technology. As technology advances, and we have AI and automated things, for lack of better wording, and such. And Hollywood and certain things have touched on this a little bit. If you've seen the movie Her or the movie I, Robot with Will Smith, you might know where this question is coming. Do we ever reach a point in which synthetic AI beings deserve rights, where we have a discussion of what rights does a robot have, or what rights does a piece of AI have?
In other countries in the world, there are people that have married robots.
Sure. But that's more like, I think that's a case of the robot being acted upon. What happens when we have, robots that are, for lack of a better word, acting, they get to a level of, I don't know, sentience, if you will, that they can, to some act of their own accord.
Well, according to my 16-year-old, that means Skynet's real, and we better watch out because Sarah Connor's coming back.
Well, maybe Skynet doesn't kill us if we're nice to Skynet and give them rights. Maybe they kill us because we didn't give them their rights. But I don't, in like an iRobot type situation where, and to make it a little easier, we'll say the robots look humanoid. Almost, let's say the robots are indistinguishable from humans almost, except for the fact that they are indeed robots. You wouldn't tell unless they told you. I mean, do robots get rights?
That is a very touchy one because they are still man-made, but at the same time, you could probably then argue then so is a test tube baby.
Well, I think then you just kind of get into the deeper question of what is it to be alive, what is to dream, and what is it that does distinguish us from machines, which what we were talking about earlier is what we're going to have to figure out. People are going to have to find things to do that machines can't do because the machines do it better. And to be honest, these aren't things that people should be doing. Truck driving is not a rewarding job to the truck driver in any aspect. I don't think any truck driver improves themselves in any, well, I mean, maybe, but it's not coming from the truck driving itself. You know what I mean? All they're getting is their body broken and their mind grayed from spacing out. So, I think it's a good thing for those truck drivers not to do that job anymore. It's just a concern of they still have to put food on the table.
Well, then, you have philosophers like Kant and Descartes and Aristotle that have been trying to answer those questions since the beginning of man thinking. We have a whole branch right now called knowledge management. And knowledge management courses is one of the biggest courses being taught in MBA programs in the United States. It's that corporate, when did we know it, how did we know it, and how did we use that knowledge?
Interesting. Kind of breaking down. Well, I mean, I think you would agree with the rise of, I'm sure you've heard of deep fakes and all this stuff. I mean, with the internet, or since that first Photoshop picture of the giant cat, we have been on a one-way collision course with an epistemological crisis where how are we ever going to be able to tell what's real and what's not on the internet?
And a lot of times you can't.
I mean, so I don't know. Is there some way that we can, I don't know, is there some way to preserve authenticity, or is it just going to become, I mean, because we've already seen it kind of become a free-for-all of, there's enough discrepancy where people can basically find a source and believe whatever they want. Well, that's going to
Uh,
get blurrier and
yeah,
blurrier. So
yeah.
what happens when there's no common truth?
There's been movies and books that's talked about that. Running Man and several of the others, where videos are shown the person committing an actual crime that they didn't do it, but they've got videos showing that they did.
What
And
happens when a 13-year-old can do that?
yeah, and we're at that stage where governments are doing those type of things right now. Corporations are doing those type of things right now. Where
Is there
they're
anything we can do to mitigate the negative effects, or is it just something we're going to have to live
It's
with?
something we're going to have to live with and live with the effects of. And
I mean,
there's gonna have to be some type of penalty too when people are caught
yeah,
falsifying.
how do we get back to some, how do we get, we don't need to necessarily go back to totally to Walter Cronkite, but, at least there was some kind of consensus of what facts were. But when, data themselves can start to be faked, then, in the early stages of the internet, it was, well, you don't believe anything on the internet. And then the stage 2 was like, oh, I saw it on the internet. And now we're kind of going into stage 3 where it's a mix of both, where there's all the information on the internet, all the true information is out there. The problem is there's 5 times as much fake information purporting to be the same thing. So
I call that the Timmy Turner syndrome.
why is that?
From the cartoon Fairly Odd Parents,
Yeah,
because
no,
he always said found it on the internet when he was trying
oh,
to
okay, okay,
explain
okay,
something.
okay, yes, yeah, okay. I didn't get the reference, but yes, just like that. Um, mm, I don't know. You want to do one more?
Let's do one more.
All right. Pick me a number that's not 9 or 5.
10.
Number 95. Okay, I don't know, this might be a quick one, might not be. Is poverty in society inevitable?
Boy, we could probably do 200 broadcasts on that one. There's always going to be people that want more and have more, unfortunately. There has been, since the Bible's been written, ancient documents, Chinese documents, and those that have are always going to want to make sure that there are others that can't have.
Yeah.
You see that with private gated communities, even in housing. If you don't have a house or can't buy a house as nice as mine, we don't even want you here. We're going to gate the community off to you.
Would you say that they are inflating the value of their materialistic goods because maybe inside they know their materialistic goods actually hold no value whatsoever, so they self-inflate the alleged value of materialism so that they advantage that they know they have, you know?
No, one of the more famous lines out of the 80s Wall Street movie, greed is good. And there is a huge aspect that took that in the United States and across the world and ran with it. I mean, there shouldn't be no real reason to have billionaires. I mean, that's just downright greed. If you're a billionaire and you've got people that are working for you and they're just making minimum wage, that's a wrong model.
I mean, and I'm definitely not going to disagree with your sentiment. I might not agree on the exactness of it, but I always do want to put counterpoints out there because that gets nuanced discussion. I listen to a podcast called the All In Podcast with a bunch of venture capital dudes like Chamath Palihapitiya, if you know who that is, David. Anyway, just a bunch of VC guys, and they were making the argument, and they were talking. They talk about stuff, and they kind of are on a spectrum. One is more to the left, one's on the right, the other two in the middle. But anyway, they were talking about kind of, once you hit 1 billion, you just shouldn't be able to go any higher. And they were arguing that if that's the case, then it stops, people from wanting to innovate farther. So if Jeff Bezos knows he's going to max out at 1 million, he has no incentive to continue developing Amazon.
Well, when you think about it in certain terms too, what is a hedge fund manager? Hedge fund manager does absolutely nothing.
Oh no, yeah, no. That's all I'm talking. Yeah, those people I 100% agree on. But someone, I think you could definitely argue that Amazon is a positive. The fact that Amazon exists is amazing. I can get something
It's
on my phone, and that
yeah, it's a
provides value
different,
to
complete
society.
business model.
But
The
if you tell
complaint for
Jeff
years
Bezos,
was that Walmart was killing the little guy store. Well,
they
now
still are.
Amazon is killing Walmart and Targets and
They're
JC
both.
Penney's
Well, I think they're both
and
doing
those
it.
type of markets.
No, I agree with you. I think small businesses need saving in America. I'm a big proponent of small businesses. Um, America without small businesses, the big chains have no reason to compete.
And I think there's a refocus back on small businesses because Amazon will sell small business products because small business products can now be bought online. I think there's a
But
refocus
then,
on smaller
unfortunately,
businesses.
Amazon takes that, copies the plan, then lists their own for $10 cheaper. That's more of an antitrust issue. Would you agree? There's a
True.
huge there's the antitrust aspect of big tech is another issue where legislative. I mean, I don't have time, and no one does, to sit around and watch every congressional hearing. But some of the lines of questioning towards the tech CEOs from these members of Congress are, it's almost like me asking my grandmother what the Wi-Fi password is, and she says Internet Explorer, and I'm like, no, that's not what I'm asking. So, how can we even begin to approach, because, the monopolization is a huge issue, because you're right. If Amazon is allowing small businesses, that's good. But then if we don't stop them from doing what I say, then at the end, it's a short term, and then they come back and kill it at the
Well,
end.
well, even sites like Etsy. Etsy's all about the small business and selling specific things across to a larger market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, that's another area where, I don't think there should be strong. I'm not ever a fan of overburdening regulation, because the more regulation you have, the more it hurts the small business, unfortunately, because you get, what regulation capture, where, Facebook wants it to be law that platforms have to monitor speech or the argument is that Facebook would want that to become law, because then the only platform that can exist is someone who can afford to hire 30,000 moderators. You know what I mean?
Yep. Or
So
30,000 lawyers to keep them out of court.
yes, so it's regulatory capture, where things that are meant to rein in the big businesses actually just end up being a higher barrier of entry to small businesses. But yeah, man, this has been another delicious feast for my frontal cortex, and I know all of you are probably going to need a couple hours to just consume, digest all this very interesting information. But until the next time, I am DP2 the Brain. A big thank you to Dr. Brian Bradshaw for taking the time out to talk with us, and keep on feasting on knowledge, my friends.